Okay, I just want to run through some data and some of the news of the morning, and then we're going to turn to the topic. So, in terms of economic data, we had 50,000. The employment report came out this morning for December. As you know, the headline number, there were 50,000 jobs created. The consensus forecast was anywhere at the low end, about 60,000 jobs created. The high end I saw was 73,000. So this was below consensus. So from that standpoint, it was slightly soft, which is why on the release of the number, you saw the dollar weaken a bit. Now, 50,000 jobs created is, you know, a few months ago, we were worried, very concerned that we would see a whole series of negative job growth numbers. And in fact, a few months ago, we did get a few. And the major concern was that, okay, we were not only going to enter a stage where there would be low hiring, but we would see actually net firing, net job loss. So that has not transpired. So that's actually pretty good news. So even though this number was slightly below expectations, I would say it is a bit of a relief. And overall, I think the market is breathing a sigh of relief, and that's why we're seeing a pretty solid stock market reaction today. Now, the unemployment rate uh, is very important for not so much for the markets, but for the Fed. And if we were to see the unemployment rate creep up, that would start to put pressure on the Fed. Even in the face of positive job growth, a rising unemployment rate would put the Fed in a situation where they would have to contemplate reducing interest rates, if not later this month, perhaps in the next meeting. But we didn't see that. In fact, we saw the unemployment rate tick down a bit. It ticked down from 4.5% to 4.4%. That was not anticipated. So a better unemployment rate than expected. And that means that there is really zero chance that the Fed is going to cut interest rates in January. And I would estimate that from this point forward, unless we see a meaningful rise in the unemployment rate, which I think is unlikely at this point, the Fed will probably be on hold for the remainder of Jay Powell's term as chairman of the Fed, and that expires in May. So, uh, again, for those of you in the currency program, I think this is pretty good news for the dollar. And I think for stock investors, the market doesn't really care as long as we're creating stable, steady job growth, and the economy continues to grow strongly, which it seems to be. This is good news for stock investors as well, and stock investors will not need to see lower interest rates for the stock market to rally as long as we're seeing strong economic growth. And we are seeing strong economic growth. Just going back to the third quarter, we saw the economy expand at a 4.3% rate. And this quarter, my favorite indicator is the Atlanta Fed produces a GDP real-time indicator. Well, it's not real time, there is a lag, but it takes all the data and aggregates it. And right now it's telling us that for the fourth quarter of last year, it seems like the economy grew at a 5.1% pace. Yesterday it was telling us 5.4%. Today it's ticked down a little bit. I still think 5.1% is probably a bit unrealistic. And I think that number will continue to come down as we get more data. But growth, let's say it comes down to 4% growth. That is remarkably strong growth. If we have two consecutive quarters, third quarter and fourth quarter of 4% or higher, that's a lot of momentum coming into 2026. So there's no reason at all that that the market should be worried that the Fed isn't going to cut interest rates again. And this is really a nice picture for corporate earnings as we're preparing to uh, get fourth quarter earnings fairly soon. And then the outlook again for 2026 looks to be pretty bright. Now let's move to our topic. Oh no, before we move to our topic, I just want to discuss some international events. First, Iran, and obviously this is a really big story. It's not only a big story because it's important in terms of geopolitics, but if we did see the Iranian regime fall, this is an enormous, enormous positive for financial markets, for global financial markets. It would be a major positive. Um, so this is an important story to follow. The protests have now spread to every single province in Iran. There are 31 provinces, and a few days ago, we could say that the protests were taking place in 28 of the 31. Now these protests are occurring in all 31 provinces. The government is increasingly worried. We know they're increasingly worried because last night, they shut down all internet services throughout the country, and they turned off the electricity. So there were blackouts throughout Iran. The big question in my mind is, will the U.S., with the Trump administration, ask Elon Musk to provide to activate Starlink and therefore allow the Iranian people to have access to internet, and that way they can communicate with one another and be able to coordinate their protests. That's very, very important. So let's hope that happens. So far, we don't have any information that has taken place. The other thing the Trump administration could do is try to scramble the government's own communication services. From what I understand, that is possible. I don't know the technology involved, but it's something that we have the capacity to do. So if the Trump administration really wants to help the Iranian people, those are two fairly straightforward things that can be done. So let's monitor that in the days ahead. The other, obviously, major international event that's taking place is this political transition that is taking place in Venezuela. This morning, we were supposed to get the release of 100 political prisoners that the government has been holding. They actually hold 1,000 political prisoners. So 100 of these 1,000 were supposed to be released by this morning. Apparently, they've only released a handful. I've heard about 8 have been released. So the 100 hasn't happened, but Trump seems to be encouraged that the release of prisoners is going forward, and he believes that is a real signal that the new regime in Venezuela is still a dictatorship, but that it is playing ball, it is heeding the warnings of the Trump administration, and therefore the path towards a continued transition should proceed. Now, Trump was asked in an interview with Sean Hannity a few nights ago whether elections will be held. And Trump said, yes, of course elections will be held, but it's going to take some time. I think that the actual word he uses, a long time. Now, what does a long time mean? That's a very vague statement. A long time could mean 8 months, it could mean 12 months, it could mean 18 months or 24 months. That's impossible to know. But I think time is not the variable that the Trump administration is watching. The key variable they're going to be monitoring is, how do you get Venezuela back on a stable footing, and how do you lay the groundwork to actually hold an election? Because right now you probably couldn't hold a clean election, and even if you could, the risk that the next government would be toppled very quickly is high. So it makes sense that Trump is taking his time. I know a lot of people are frustrated that elections aren't happening now, but it's just not a realistic expectation. So in my mind, in Iran and Venezuela, still a lot of risks, but so far so good. Guys, just a note on Venezuela. I had been searching, in recent months for a way for us to be able to play Venezuela, for a way to be able to invest in Venezuela. I was looking for instruments, ETFs. There is nothing, unfortunately. Just in the first few days since Maduro has been booted out, the Venezuelan stock market is up over 100%, just a matter of in a couple days. So that would have been amazing to be able to play that. And believe me, I was searching because we knew this day was coming, but there was just no instrument for us to access. So anyway, let's move on now to
If I can just
what's.
jump in, what about playing Iran?
There's no way to play Iran. There's no instruments to play.
Thank you.
Yeah. There, they don't even have a stock market. At least Venezuela has a stock market, but Iran does not even have a stock market. Anyway, moving to what's bothering me. I sent out a video. I hope some of you were able to watch it. If not, I'm going to describe it. So this is an interview, a staged interview, because Tucker Carlson organized this interview himself because he wanted to send a message. And in this interview, Tucker Carlson describes in some detail that he was fast asleep in his bedroom with his wife, and he was attacked by demons. He was attacked by demons, and he wasn't sure if it was a dream or not a dream. But then when he woke up, he examined his body, and he saw huge claw marks on his body, and that was clear proof that he had been attacked by demons. Now, I'm just curious. I'd love to see. Does anyone actually believe that he could have been attacked by demons? And I'm not. I'm asking on. This is an honest question. A show of hands. Does anyone think that this could be a possibility? And I'll explain to you why I'm asking the question. And don't be embarrassed. So Justin thinks it's possible. Now I'm laughing because Justin is. I've mentioned this before. I've known Justin since I was probably 19 years old. So I'm just chuckling. I don't believe Justin thinks he was active. But if anyone believes he was attacked by demons, I don't think it's possible. A 1 to 5% chance. Maybe it was a Demogorgon. Lori, what's a Demogorgon? Okay.
It's a character.
Okay. I didn't know what a Demogorgon was. Anyway, it doesn't seem like anyone thinks he could be attacked by demons. I don't. I don't think it's possible. So there's a question. And the question is, and I hope I don't offend anyone when I say this, but he's either crazy.
Hi, Seth.
or
Somebody is unmuted again. I
Oh,
hear some background noise.
okay, let's see if I can shut them down. Mute all. Okay. Either he's lost his marbles or he is up to something. And I don't believe that he's crazy. I don't believe he's crazy. I think he's got a strategy. What's the strategy? The strategy could be the following, and I'm not inventing this. This is coming from someone who spent his lifetime living in the South, living among a certain group of evangelical Christians that truly believe that demons could attack people. And I'm not making fun of it. I'm not dismissing it. I'm trying to understand what Tucker Carlson might be up to. So Tucker Carlson wants to really make a dramatic transformation in the conservative movement in the country. in the right wing of the United States, specifically in the Republican Party. And he knows that the core, the rock of the Republican Party for many years has been evangelical Christians. And according to the analysis that I heard, is someone I think is very credible, there is a certain group, and it's not that small, that believes that human beings can be attacked physically, not just emotionally, not just spiritually, not not um, not a metaphor, but literally be physically attacked by demons, and demons could actually leave physical marks on your body. Now, why would a demon attack someone in their sleep? Well, the idea is a demon would attack someone if this individual is engaged in a holy cause. And the evil forces in the spiritual world want this person's holy mission to be stopped. And therefore, the demons will do everything they can to stop this person from achieving his or her holy mission. So, according to this line of thinking, the world is in a great spiritual battle. Now, I also believe the world is in a great spiritual battle, but according to this view, there are two real forces in the world, right? There's there's God and there's a devil. And it's not clear who's going to win this great battle. And they're in a struggle. It is a tug of war. And Tucker Carlson is on the holy side, and he's been attacked. Now, if Tucker Carlson can succeed in his strategy, the hope is, his goal is to break a significant percentage of evangelicals away from their support for Donald Trump and other, let's say, so-called conventional conservatives. And if he can do that, he can really fracture the Republican Party, fracture the conservative movement, and create a new movement that consists not only of some of the traditional conservatives, but also some leftists. And if you've noticed, if you listen to Tucker Carlson, a lot of his rhetoric sounds very similar to the radical left, right? He has praised Nicolas Maduro, the dictator of Venezuela. He said nice things about Mamdani, the radical mayor of New York. Why is he doing these things? A couple of years ago, such praise would have never come out of Tucker Carlson's mouth. The only way you can make sense of this is if you have this idea that he is trying to create a new coalition of this new woke right together with the left. And in doing so, his medium-term goal is to deliver a major blow to the political system. And he or someone he's close to can, at some point in the not too distant future, win a presidential election in the United States. Now, what's bothering me about all this is, despite the complete off the wall scheme that Tucker Carlson is up to, whether you think he's actually completely nuts or you think he's got a real strategy here. In either case, unfortunately, his following has not tailed off. It still seems to be very robust. And that to me is deeply, deeply upsetting and quite concerning. And the fact that J.D. Vance has not openly distanced himself from Tucker Carlson, to me, is highly troublesome. So that brings me to my next concern, which is J.D. Vance. In the last couple of weeks, J.D. Vance gave 2 interviews, and in each of these interviews, he was asked about anti-Semitism. And in these 2 interviews, in the first interview, J.D. Vance was asked about criticism of Israel and what he feels about it. And does he feel that is criticizing Israel the same thing as anti-Semitism? And his response was, no, of course not. There's nothing wrong with criticizing countries, right? There's nothing wrong with criticizing Israel. And to conflate the two, that is, to say criticizing Israel is the same thing as anti-Semitism, is completely unfair. Now, on the face of it, that sounds completely reasonable. And by the way, this is an argument that the left makes constantly. We are only criticizing Israel. We have no problem with Jews whatsoever. I'll tell you the major flaw in this argument and what really bothers me about it. I have never heard over the course of the last 2.5 years, basically since Hamas attacked Israel, I have not heard one genuine criticism of Israel made by anyone in the United States. What are the criticisms we hear? We hear that Israel was starving people in Gaza, starving kids in Gaza, right? And we all saw the pictures, the images of starving children in Israel. Every single one of those pictures was false, right? There were actually 0 starving people in Israel. Zero starving people in Gaza. That has been proven without a shadow of a doubt by this point. So that is not a criticism of Israel. It's a blood libel. It's absolute slander, a complete lie. Another criticism that we hear commonly is genocide. Israel has committed genocide in Gaza. Also a complete lie. If you just look at population growth in Gaza, of the people living in Gaza, you'll see that the population has increased steadily. Obviously, that doesn't happen in genocides. And as we've discussed here in great depth in the past, there has been no army in the world that has ever been so careful at protecting civilian lives, right? It's unprecedented how careful Israel has been, and the ratio of combatant to civilian deaths has never been so low in any war ever been conducted in modern history, meaning that very, very few civilians were killed relative to combatants. So another absolute slander, a blood libel. So not a criticism of Israel. It's just pure anti-Semitism. Another one, Israel controls U.S. policy. It's a joke. It's laughable. Again, we've gone through some of these arguments in the past. I won't relitigate it, but it's preposterous. The U.S. fights wars because Israel tells the United States to fight wars. These are absolute slanders. These are not criticisms of Israel, it's pure anti-Semitism. And the reason why this is the way both the right extreme, the left and the extreme right, the Tucker Carlson right, launches these types of criticisms at Israel rather than just going after Jews in general is because it's become politically acceptable. So it's a way of disguising anti-Semitism. Now, what are again, of course you can criticize Israel. There's no problem, just like you can criticize the United States. What are some examples of fair criticisms of Israel? And by the way, people in the United States generally don't know enough about Israel to even know some of the criticisms I'm going to make right now. Like Tucker Carlson is probably not even aware. Candace Owens. Israel happens to be a deeply polarized society, just like the United States is a deeply polarized society. And that's a problem because when you are polarized, it weakens you. So we have polarization between the very left-wing secular people and the more right-wing religious people. That's a big problem. Another criticism that would be fair is the press in Israel is very anti-Netanyahu. It's almost impossible to read a newspaper that isn't deeply ideological and hell-bent on undermining the prime minister of Israel. Very similar to the United States, right? So these are two criticisms that you could make about the United States and make about Israel. I'll give you just one more that is sort of unique to Israel. The Supreme Court in Israel is hyper powerful. It happens to be the most powerful Supreme Court in the world with almost no checks on its power. So any policy that gets approved by the Israeli Knesset, which is their Congress, and gets signed into law by the prime minister, it can be overturned by the Supreme Court. No one even needs to go and make a lawsuit. It can just, Supreme Court on its own can overturn the law. Right? So, and that creates all sorts. These are all very fair criticisms of Israel that someone could make. And Israelis themselves make these criticisms. So there's nothing wrong with criticizing it. That's fair. That's fair. But the criticisms that people make in this country are always, that I've heard anyway, come from anti-Semitism. And it's a way of concealing it. So when J.D. Vance says something like that it's fair to criticize Israel, why is he doing that? He's playing right into the woke right's hands. And he doesn't want to offend them. He wants their votes. Or maybe even worse, maybe he shares their views. I don't know which one. So that's really bothering me. The other thing that J.D. Vance said in the other interview, he was asked the question, is anti-Semitism a problem? And he said, of course it's a problem. Just like prejudice against anybody is wrong, right? It's wrong to be prejudiced against blacks. It's wrong to be prejudiced against whites. It's wrong to be prejudiced against, you name it, you name the group. Now, again, that sounds at a surface level like a totally reasonable response. Totally reasonable. Why is it not a reasonable response? Again, it's the same thing that the left does. By the way, anytime a college president, a university president, has been forced to condemn the anti-Semitism on his college campus, what does he do? He says, we condemn anti-Semitism and we condemn Islamophobia. But guess what? There is no Islamophobia on college campuses. They just do it as a way to water down their criticism of Jew hatred. And that's all J.D. Vance was doing. He was watering it down. And the truth is, there's only, unfortunately, one group that is being blasted day in and day out on social media, in the newspaper, in the press, by political parties, by Tucker Carlson, by Nick Fuentes. I don't hear any other group getting singled out, really. But it's consistently against Jews. And J.D. Vance, again, is ducking the question. And that's a problem. So that's bothering me. Okay. I want to move on to still what's bothering me, but moving to international politics, geopolitics. A big criticism today from mostly the Democratic Party and our media is that the Trump administration, Donald Trump, is destroying the post-World War II order. What is the post-war, when people talk about the post-World War II global order, what are they referring to? They're referring to the role that multilateral institutions have in maintaining order between countries. So we're talking about mostly the UN, but there's other international agencies as well. For example, the WTO, the World Trade Organization, which oversees trade agreements between countries. The WTO, that's another big one. There's others as well. I won't get into them. But Trump is destroying all of it. He's destroying and ignoring these multilateral institutions. And he's also ignoring, very importantly, the role of diplomacy. And therefore, we've moved towards a world that was regulated by law and order. And now we have transitioned into what political theorists call a Hobbesian world. Hobbes was a political philosopher from hundreds of years ago. And Hobbes basically had this theory that the world is chaotic and it's survival of the fittest. The strongest win. It's very much the world of evolution, right? The most fit survive and the weak get run over. And the media, the Democratic Party, and let's call them, for lack of a better word, the global elites. I don't love that word, but we'll use it. The global elites are blasting Trump for trashing this world order. And we are now in this Hobbesian world where it's just might makes right. And the weaker get absolutely run over. And what's their evidence of this? Well, it's because Trump just sent in the U.S. military to extract dictator Maduro out of Venezuela, and we ran roughshod over Venezuelan sovereignty. They also point to our attack on Iran over the summer back in June. Both of these uses of force were astonishingly successful, but they're absolutely offended by it. Now, I want to point out that these are the very same people who have been upset with Trump for negotiating with Putin, trying to negotiate and use diplomacy with Putin rather than funding Ukraine to the hilt and supplying Ukraine with as many weapons as they need to wage a successful war and possibly even defeat Putin. So on the one hand, they criticize Trump heavily for resorting to military force and transitioning to the world to a Hobbesian world, but at the same time, they blast him for using diplomacy against Putin. So these analysts, the press, the media, the Democrat, they are absolutely contradicting themselves. And I don't even think they're aware that they're contradicting themselves. And if they are, they don't even care, because really, this is all about criticizing Trump. Their hatred for Trump blinds them from actually being analytical and being objective. So, in my opinion, the world was always Hobbesian. We never had this world order that was governed by diplomacy and rule of law. That never existed. What happened was, after World War II, we quickly entered the Cold War. And the Cold War was basically a huge, dangerous rivalry between the Soviet Union and the United States. We saw that Cold War actually play out sometimes in hot wars, right? We saw hot wars all over Central America. We saw it in Vietnam, where the Soviet forces and U.S. military forces, they never went head to head against each other. But we saw proxy wars, communism fighting against democracy, the U.S. always supporting democratic forces around the world, and the Soviets supporting communist forces throughout the world, right? We saw battle after battle. So that's not a world of law and order. That's a Hobbesian world. But then, after the fall of communism in the 90s, we went through this temporary period of relative peace. And it lasted, we can pretend it lasted. Let's pretend it lasted. It didn't really last because we had plenty of wars, but let's pretend it lasted until Russia invaded Ukraine. And China began flexing its muscle more and more aggressively, but by taking more and more territory in the Southeast Asia seas, where they're building up islands and threatening the Philippines and threatening Japan. These events don't get a lot of attention in the media, but China is constantly taking more and more little islets, they're called. And this is the reason why we're so concerned about Xi Jinping taking Taiwan, because he really is getting increasingly aggressive. There was So why did we have this temporary period that lasted between, let's say the 90s, and we can stretch it out and say until 2022 when Putin invaded Ukraine? And by the way, Putin started invading Ukraine as early as 2013, 2014. It's just that the media kind of ignored it and didn't pay attention to it. But he was taking territory in the Donbass region of the Ukraine as early as 2013, 2014, under the Obama administration. The reason why we had this temporary period is because of relative peace, was not because we lived in with the strength of multilateral institutions and law and order, and people were respecting the global world order. Not at all. It was because the United States was the only superpower in the world. And the other powers in the world, which weren't superpowers, they were a bit afraid to test the United States. But as China has become stronger and stronger, and the United States became less willing to flex its muscle, and we were spending less on our military defense, China and then Russia could take advantage of the United States. That's the only reason. The world was always Hobbesian. It was always the most powerful are the greatest aggressors. No one ever respected the United Nations. No one ever respected any of the multilateral institutions. It's always been might makes right. It's just that we went through a 15 to 20-year period where the United States was by far the mightiest. And because we were by far the mightiest, we were right. And we had relative calm in the world. But now that the playing field is more balanced between China and the United States, we're starting to see, or we've started to see for actually many years now, more aggressive actions by countries that are aligned with China. So it really disturbs me that there's so many people who are misrepresenting this theoretical concept of a multilateral world, a global order where there was peace and tranquility, and now we're throwing it into the garbage heap because Trump isn't respecting the world order. I hope this is making some sense to you guys. Going to my next complaint. And I have many. I don't know if I'm going to get to all of them, but this one is particularly dangerous and concerning. So I want to make sure I cover it. There is this incredible naivete regarding Islam. And just to give you an example of how naive the world is, just a few days ago, the United Kingdom allowed for the Palestinians to open up an embassy in London. And that just smacks of how incredible naive Europe is. And it's not only Europe, it's the whole world, or much of the world, and certainly the United States. Europe is being absolutely overtaken by Islam. And it's a time bomb because Muslims have somewhere between 6 and 8 children per family, whereas traditional Europeans have under 1 child per family. So this is indeed a time bomb, and the Europeans remain in complete denial. To such an extent that the politicians in Europe, because they see the demographics, they see the demographic shift, they know to be a successful politician, you have to appeal to the Muslims that are growing at a very fast rate. And therefore, their policies, they cater to the Muslim community. Now, what they don't understand is that a core tenet of Islam is that it is an absolute injustice for Muslims to live under the rule of a non-Muslim government. It is an absolute catastrophe for them to live under non-Muslim governments. And therefore, the goal of the Islamist movement is to take over governments anywhere that Muslims live. Now, doesn't this just refer to radical Muslims, right? Aren't there moderate Muslims that actually don't believe this? Right? That's a good question. And after doing enormous amounts of research on this topic, because I do not want to mislead anyone, I don't want to say untruths. The truth is, the religion, the Quran, is very clear. It is truly an abomination for a Muslim to live under non-Islamic governance. And those governments that are non-Islamic must be overturned. And the goal of Islam is to overturn all governments throughout the world and set them free. Because liberation can only happen when all territories where Muslims live are governed by Islamic law. Now, what is a moderate Muslim? Well, there are two kinds of moderate Muslims. One kind is the kind that is not a jihadist. A jihadist is someone who wants to accomplish this goal fast, very, very fast. And all strategies to accomplish this goal fast are acceptable. Suicide bombing, blowing up buses, murdering children, it's all acceptable because jihad must be done fast. So that's a radical, right? Or we call an Islamist. That is a jihadist or an Islamist. One type of moderate is no, we do not have to accomplish this quickly. We can take the next 50 to 100 years to get this job done. So we don't have to do it ourselves. We can leave it to our children. We can leave it to our grandchildren. And we can do it simply through growth, population growth rates. We see the trajectory of the Western world in terms of the demographics. And we just have to be patient. It's just a matter of time before we liberate the world. So that's one type of moderate. The other type of moderate Muslim is the Muslim that actually just doesn't put into practice these ideas. They're happy to practice Islam in their home, but they sort of ignore the political and social aspects of Islam. Yes, the political and social aspects of Islam are 100% a part of the religion, right? They're in the Quran, they're in the Hadith. Muhammad spoke about it very clearly, but we're choosing to ignore that. We're not going to lead our lives that way. We're just going to practice Islam in our homes. So that's the other type of moderate. But if you really want to understand Islam, to really understand it, we can't be in denial. The Islam is absolutely total. Yes, it applies to the home. It applies to the personal. But it also applies to the social, and it applies to the political. And you can't ignore that a central tenet is complete control. Now, what type of Muslims are in Europe? A huge percentage, and no one really knows the exact percentage, but a huge percentage is of the jihadist type. Fast, get it done quickly. Now, in the United States, we're also just as naive as the Europeans for the most part. How many people understand this? How many of you have heard this type of analysis of Islam? It sounds incredibly prejudiced. It sounds awful. It sounds evil to speak about a religion like this. But these are the facts. We cannot deny the facts. So I want to conclude with the final topic that's bothering me, which is you had for a few years all these protests against Israel on college campuses in major US cities, right? In favor of the people in Gaza, against Israel. I have seen zero protests in support of the Iranian people. Zero. And I've seen zero protests anywhere in favor of the Venezuelan people. In fact, the only protests I've seen are protests against the United States trying to protect the Venezuelan people and ousting a brutal dictator. What is wrong with this country? It is unbelievable the passion that people have for supporting truly evil actors. And at best, apathy for supporting the true heroes, which are the Iranians and the Venezuelan people. And you don't hear much talk about this. So that's my final issue. Well, I have many others, but I'm going to leave it there. Um, but we truly need to revamp our education system, to revisit our values. You know, we're supposed to be a nation of Christian values, Jewish values. Where are we? Where are we?